Okay, and we are live. Welcome, 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 ladies and gentlemen of the interwebs. I am so thrilled. I am so thrilled for today's live stream because over the past 11 years of being a speech coach, I've realized that there's one thing that I love in terms of my job, and that's actually like getting people on stages, on stages, be it a small stage or be it a big stage. But especially, I love it when people are able to land TEDx talks. Um, and so these two individuals that you see on your screen, you guys want to say hi and just a quick introduction to yourselves?
Hello. Go ahead, Ali. I'll let you go first.
Oh, thank you. Hello, everybody. My name's Ali Matu. I am a psychologist, and I try to make mental health easier to access, to talk about, make it fun, make it easy, make it serious when it needs to be serious, but also silly when it needs to be silly, because it's a weird, silly thing too sometimes.
Great introduction. And how about you, Punam?
Hi there. I'm Punam Saxena. I'm a parent impact coach, and which means that I help parents and schools connect and break down barriers so they communicate more effectively for student success.
Excellent.
And I want to know, Ali, in your title, it says internet personality. I think you should
I didn't put that in.
elaborate.
I appreciate the assist. I did not put that in there, but it has found its way in. Yeah, so I have a YouTube channel. Dr. Ali Matu is my channel, and there I make videos. A lot of videos about anxiety, but also videos about depression, about bipolar depression, about all of these kind of things, and some of them are entertaining and fun, and then some of them again are serious when need be. But yeah, you can find me over there.
I will be checking you out.
Where did internet personality come from? 'Cause I know I jacked that from the internet when I was putting together the profile. So yeah, why don't you talk about where that came from?
Yeah, I don't know. I think Google is just serving that as a result. I have no idea where that came from. Is not my doing. I 100% promise. I'm gonna blame the AI. I think it's just, yeah.
Blame the bots.
But blame, pass the blame. I like it.
Fast blame.
I've learned from the best.
I liked it, and I snagged it for your title because in addition to being a TEDx speaker, I think it was really cool that you spent so much time actually like leaning into being a YouTuber, and Punam, you as a podcaster and a writer. So actually, that's what I wanted to kind of talk about for anybody who's streaming or who's like watching this today or on the replay. I first want to kind of like start off with the backstories for these two individuals, because I think a lot of people actually see these individuals on stages, but you don't necessarily know like what they've done in order to prepare themselves to get onto those stages. So let's do a little bit of the backstory, if you guys are cool with that. And because long story short, Ali, you just spoke at TEDx Berkeley, right? That was
like 6-8 weeks ago or something.
Yeah, like a little less than 2 months. So bravo.
Thank you.
Closed out. Not yet public, correct?
The whole restream is all public. I think the actual video will be posted like 6 months to 12 months down the road, something like that.
Okay, got it. Which is very common for many TEDx events. My own TED Talk wasn't published for years officially, but then it eventually did come out. But they did give me permission to post it onto YouTube. So you'll see two different versions on YouTube. And Punam, you spoke at TEDx Ocala. That was at the end of last year?
No, it's been, let's see, 2020?
No, it wasn't.
All that time is very vague.
I know, it's just
2020, 2023. It's like
2021, 2022.
I think the 2020s is a good ballpark of when I spent. It was I want to say it was 2021.
I want to say it was 2021 as well. We could be wrong. We'll double check those facts. But the point being that they've both had these journeys to get to these amazing stages. So Ali, let's first start with you, and because we actually met back in New York City.
Yeah.
And at the time, I know that you were like really looking to just kind of get on stage and share first off your story.
Yeah.
So kind of like share with us a little bit of the impetus, like what it was like for you to think about, like where were you in your own personal life that made you say, I want to actually start to share some of my personal story.
Yeah. So I finished graduate school in 2012, and up until that point, everything I was doing was just trying to get out of grad school to get my doctorate in clinical psychology, get my career started, all that sort of stuff. And this was around 2010, 2011, 2012. And during that time, social media was becoming much more of a thing that people were using to tell stories. Podcasts were just sort of starting to come around, and more people were really noticing what these things are. And I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to share a lot of the stuff that I know. And so I started experimenting with that kind of stuff. And the more I started to do either conferences or try to get on people's podcasts, or I started writing. Well, first I learned I was terrible at it. Like that was the very first thing I learned. Because I had been trained for many, many years to write as an academic psychologist, which, like, if you take most things that you read and then you turn them upside down, that's how I was writing. I buried the lead. The headline was way down below here. There's all this stuff that's this long lead in that makes the audience more and more and more and more narrow. It's great for that audience, the audience of psychologists who are super interested in this tiny niche topic. But it was not so good for trying to speak to the masses, which is what I was trying to do. So I was learning how to do this stuff. And the more, Dawn, I started to try to share what I know, I found that I had to share more about myself as well. And I got connected with an organization called the Jed Foundation, which was a group that got me connected with Dawn, because we were doing a storytelling night where we were sharing our own mental health stories. And Dawn was working, you were a teacher or a coach through the MOF?
Yeah, and the instructor.
Yeah. So we got paired up, which is like one of those just total moments of fate. Like Dawn and I instantly connected. We had this, like, we were on the same wavelength. And I was sharing a story about what it was like for me to lose my brother to suicide, something that had happened about 5 years prior. And this story kind of became like this blockage for me, because whenever I would speak publicly, people would ask me questions about, oh, what was it like growing up, or how did you get interested in psychology? And I found that I kept hiding behind all this stuff because I wasn't yet ready to talk about losing my brother. And Dawn really helped me to sort of find a way into the story that felt authentic, but also safe for me. And I did that story, and then I kind of went forward, and to kind of sum up a lot of time, I found the confidence to share more of what I know, to share more about myself. I started a YouTube channel that led to more opportunities, and that's kind of catches us up to like where we are now.
Yeah. And one of the things that you just mentioned that I had to take note of was this idea that it wasn't just the idea. You weren't just talking about clinical psychology or like, anxiety, things like this, but people needed to know like the you. They needed to connect the person that was sharing the idea to the idea itself.
Yeah.
Because idea,
which I never expected.
Right.
Yeah.
So
And no
how
one taught me how to do that. I mean, no one taught me how to do that till I met you, Doug. But that was something I was wholly unprepared for,
Mhm.
felt very uncomfortable with, and yeah, that took a lot of work to figure that out.
I know that one of the things that you really took in and like went with it was this idea that we tell stories from our scars and not our wounds. Um, and so I'm curious, meaning that we tell stories from a place where we've healed from it.
Yeah.
We've either gone through therapy or we've gone through something that we can feel like we can get on a stage and talk about these issues, as opposed to getting on the stage and having the audience feel like I'm gonna have to go hug this person or they're going to break down or something happen to them. So did you, not to get into too much of your own personal stuff, but how did you personally get yourself to that point where you could actually share the story about your brother on stages?
Yeah, well, I think I mean the time frame there was, I was about 5 years out from his passing. And enough time had gone by where I had spent a lot of time during those years healing. And it was very much a scar. And like a scar, sometimes you get hit in that same place and it hurts a little bit more. Um, and sharing the story of losing my brother was never easy, but it got to a place where I could do it and not be overwhelmed by it. And so that's part of it was and that 5 years actually matches up with a lot of the research. When people have gone through complicated grief, it usually takes them like 5 years before they're able to really start talking about it. So that idea for me has come to mean a lot of different things. One is you're able to tell that story and not be overwhelmed by it. Like you're saying, like you don't feel like you need to like embrace, support the speaker in all these ways. Also, like perspective. I think you don't have perspective when you're in the middle of trying to just stop the bleeding of whatever this thing is that you're going through. And part of perspective is also making meaning. Like I have learned something. I have found a new way forward. And for me, often that meaning making comes through the storytelling. Like I'm not able to get to that until there are these moments in my life where I sit or I talk to someone else, or sometimes I do like a more of a formal talk, and like through crafting that story I've made the meaning.
Right. It's, I'm so grateful to have met you in this process, because I know so often when I do work with people who are telling a story that's raw, I always have to let them know, like, listen, like, I am not a trained therapist. I'm not licensed to deal with this. I can refer you now to some people who can take care of you, who understand both the complexities of the story and the therapy. But it's great to know that you were able to find that time to heal, and like where that's now led you to, in terms of just being such a solid advocate for people's mental health. So yeah, so I'm going to come back to what you've been able to do now with the talk, and like with your YouTube channel. So I want to put a pin on that for just a quick sec. Cool. So Punam also has a very unique journey into this whole public speaking realm, because it wasn't even really on your radar for quite some time. So tell people, like, what were you doing, and how this did eventually just kind of get into your sphere, this whole public speaking, and even the possibility of a TEDx talk.
So I first need to say thank you for not calling the police on me, Dawn, because I never spoke with Dawn when I first heard her. She was giving a keynote speech at a podcast conference in Orlando. And I just started my podcast. I was like, oh, let me go, pie in the sky, someone's going to say something, hopefully that will inspire me and give me, 10 million followers, and I'll just be famous and
automatically overnight.
It just happens overnight, right? So I'm sitting there, she's a closing keynote, and all of us have been to conferences, and you're like, oh, the closing keynote, right? And so I'm sitting there and I'm like doodling and I'm listening to Dawn, and I stopped doodling because Dawn is such a dynamic speaker. She absolutely steals the show every time she opens, every time she's on stage. So I stop and I'm like, who is this lady? So now I'm like peering over all these tall people in front of me, going, who the hell is she? And so then I started stalking her on Facebook, on Instagram, because I'm like,
aggressive stalking on my phone. I just unblocked you, by the way. So
thank you so much.
Just for this.
Just for this. But it was because I walked out of that keynote going, that's what I want to do. I want to be able to share my voice in a manner where people are captivated by it. So I started following her on her IG lives, and I would pop in, and we just made this connection. And then when she launched Ideas that Ignite, I said, I want to join, but I don't want to do a TEDx. Like, I don't want to do that. And she goes, well, you can't join if you're not going to at least apply.
You can join, but I will try and push you onto those stages rather aggressively.
Yes. And so doing what Dawn does well, she, got me into the cohort. I started telling my story about being a first generation US born Indian American growing up in rural Georgia in the 1970s, and the fact that there was no awareness of cultural biases on tests or teaching differentiators when children are in school and English is not their first language. And so I grew up in that environment, but there was one particular test that I took in second grade and it changed my life. But when I started talking to Dawn, I started to reflect on why did that test take me from a straight A student who was confident and innovative to a C- student the day after the results came back. And it has plagued me most of my life. It's only in my 50s have I been able to say, that was a long time ago. That's an old me. So now I have found that I'm not the only person who has experienced this. It may not be a test, but every one of us has experienced some type of personal retaliation by their peers. And my test was that for me, but it could be bullying, it could be anything in a school setting. And my parents didn't know any better. They were immigrants. And so from talking with Dawn and refining my 2-minute snippet, I've been able to talk to my parents about it. And we've grown a lot in this process. And I'm finally able, we've shed tears, we have hugged, we have portrayed different scenarios of how it could have gone.
Only recently? All these conversations were all?
Yes, in the last 5 years.
Wow.
Because we're finally at a place where we can look back and understand the environment we were in.
Right.
And you don't really know until you're out of that environment. You become your own person. And quite honestly, until you're confident and secure enough to talk about it.
100%. So you needed Ali like a long time.
I did. Where have you been?
I've been hiding over here. I identify so much with a lot of what you shared here, Punam. I was put in ESL in kindergarten because they assumed I didn't speak English, but the reality I was an incredibly anxious social kid who or I was an incredibly socially anxious kid who didn't talk outside my home. But there's all these ways in which our school system completely influences our sense of self that sometimes, especially, I mean, I grew up in the 80s. It was not so good back in those days. I like to believe it's better in some places, probably in some places not. But yeah, I identify with a lot of what you shared.
And it took me a while to be able to share that story without being emotional. And I love when I came to Dawn and we started talking, she said, when you're ready to tell the story when you're not emotional about it, when you can tell it from a personal point of view, but it doesn't choke you up and you're not going to fall apart at telling it. And so now I tell that story. I told it in one of my classes last semester, and now I have refined it to where I can pause for the effect, and people think I'm going to break down. I'm like, wow, okay, I've gotten right. I've got that hook, right? I've been able to cultivate it through the narration part of it. So yeah. So when I came to you, Dawn, I just really wanted to talk to you.
Yeah. No, I remember like you were very much like, like, okay, I know that this has impacted my life significantly. And I know that it can be the foundation for like a lot of the work that you have done. And so then tell us about then how this led to because the podcast came first and then the book, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So tell us about like what the impetus was, because I think that for both of you, you started doing a lot of this work in terms of articulating an issue or a problem that was happening in our society before you even were qualified, and I'm putting that in quotes for a reason, to to speak on a stage like TEDx, right? So, and I think that work of actually figuring out what am I an expert in? Like, what am I really good at? What kind of value do I want to be able to provide into the world is a key point that some people might actually overlook, because I think that a lot of people see these TEDx talks or these TED Talks as inspirational, and they're very inspirational. Both of you are very inspirational. But one of the key things is that you guys are experts in something first. So you're experts who know how to tell a good story, not just storytellers. You know what I'm saying? And so, can you take us back a couple of steps, Punam, in terms of like why or the motivation to start to lean into your expertise as a parent advocate, somebody who is passionate about what parents can do in education, and why the podcast and then why the book?
So I'm a former special education teacher and realized that parents really don't come to the school unless there's an emergency. The kid's been bullied or they got an F on a test. That's not really when you need to get to know your teacher. That's not the best circumstances. So when I had my 4 children, 4.5 years apart, and for all of you math wizards, there are twins in there. So that's how that happened. I don't want anyone to go, oh, that's interesting. But I decided to stay home, and I kept trying to figure out what is my niche, because when you're a stay-at-home mother and your husband has his own business that he has to run, it's hard to go from being a working person to just sitting at home. And you're not sitting ever when you're a stay-at-home mother, but still, it was just a life change. And so I started volunteering. I started helping the teachers and the administrators. And what I realized was, with my background in education, I was able to partner with them. So I could be an advocate for them on the streets, in the district, with the superintendent, at the state level, because I'm not in the system. I'm not unionized. So when my kids went off to college, I did the perpetual, woe is me, my kids have left me, they're having a blast. And I just thought, they were like, see you later. But I decided to take 6 months off to try and figure out what I wanted to do. And what I realized I was good at was creating a genuine, meaningful relationship between parents and administrators and teachers.
Mm-hmm.
Breaking down all of those barriers that parents feel to walk into the school because they're not an expert in education. But what they are an expert in is their child.
Yeah.
Right.
And without that parental support, guidance, or them being a liaison, the child's only getting half of what they need in terms of support in academics. So that's what I decided to do. Then, I was like, well, I'm good at talking, so I'll just start a podcast.
And that's where we met.
And that's where we met 6
Okay,
months after I started. And then I'm like, I think I want to write a book. So then I wrote a book. And the same time, Dawn is working with me through Ideas that Ignite and pushing me to apply to TEDx's that I tried so hard not to. Because I didn't think at that point in my career I was worthy.
Mm-hmm.
Because I didn't have, in my opinion, because of my history of academic mediocrity, I didn't feel that I was worthy to stand on such a prominent stage.
Right. Right. Little did you know.
Little did I know.
Little did you know.
Little did I know. Are we holding that story till later? We'll let Aliko know.
Yeah, I'm gonna put a pin in that. I'm gonna come back to both.
Leaving me on a cliffhanger here. I want to know what happens next.
It's all about the story. You gotta tease the story. You know this. So, but I think that this is the point for both of you and for anybody who's watching, because I think a lot of people question either I have too many. The people usually fall in one of two camps. Either they have too many ideas, they don't know like which one to pick, or they feel like they have no ideas, although they spent their time, their energy in the past, X number of years to learn something, to talk about something. And one of the things I always say is like, well, what do people come to you for? Like, what do people actually ask you about? Because like you said, Punam, it's really hard to know when you're inside of your own frame, like I didn't realize that I was great at helping people to like really pull out their stories until somebody like pointed it out to me. It was like 2008 and I couldn't get hired, but I was volunteering at an organization called The Moth. And they were like, you're really damn good at this. Like, you need to do this as a job, as a career. It's like, what does that mean? Like, no entiendo. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about like how the feeling of not feeling like you are qualified to speak on the stage, and where was the shift? Like, how did you realize that actually, yeah, I am a great candidate because I am, known in my field, or people do come to me for this particular reason. Like, when did that shift, or how did it shift?
For me?
Yes, for both of you.
Okay. I think when I got the call that I got a TEDx, I think that's when it shifted. I'm like, oh, maybe I am.
Well, you have to apply though. So it must have come before that point that that this is within reach for you.
For me, when you and I were finally able to say, this is your big idea. These are the splinters of that idea. And that's how we have to cultivate your talk way before TEDx, but just even getting your head wrapped around it. That this is your idea. These are the splinter points. Let's cultivate it. That's when I started thinking, well, maybe my story is worth sharing. Maybe somebody else is in the same boat as I am, or I was. And it can help mitigate some of the emotional hardships.
Okay. So you saw a spark of what this could do for a listener, for somebody else who was not in your immediate audience at the time.
I still did it under duress. I just want to go on record.
Duly noted.
I did it because it was a process.
I will take note of that.
You went kicking and screaming.
But I'm also the kind of person who is happy to jump in and figure out how to swim later.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's the kind of person I am, and I enjoyed that challenge.
Yes. I'm gonna talk about that in a moment, because you were so meticulous about actually like working it and reworking it. I remember a couple of times you came back, you're like, hey, what about this idea? Like, you left out the story. Like, what but you were very persistent about like working and reworking it, So Aaliyah,
just so you know, she would put pins in all of my balloons until we got the right one. A lot of pins.
You were reaching for things and things that were like not in your area of expertise. So I was like, I get this, but this isn't your message. So Aaliyah, like, I know that you went through a billion different renditions for like, how did you come up with the idea? How did you finally decide on which one was going to be the one? Like, what was that process like for you?
Well, I want to echo something that Punam said, which is, for a long time I didn't think I was also worthy of being on a stage. And I think it goes back to two things. It goes back to like what, as a kid, I saw people on TV or people on stages. They were older white men for the most part. Mm-hmm. And when I was in grad school and undergrad, most of the psychologists I saw on stage in media were older white psychologists who had decades of experience, all these published papers, like all these books and all that sort of stuff. And so after I'd been doing YouTube for a while, I got my first call to do like a TV interview. And when I was talking to the producers, I was like, are you sure you want me? Like, there are more people who have done far more research and have books on this topic. Like,
there's some more guys down the street that I can get for you to put on the television show if you'd like.
Totally. Yeah, like, go talk to them. And they're like, no. We are reaching towards you because you are good at explaining these things in a way that our audience would be actually interested in. It wasn't until much later that I discovered just because you might be like well known in a field doesn't mean you're a good communicator or storyteller or that you even want to do this kind of work. It took me a long time to come to terms with that. Like, it's a very different expertise to convey a message in a way an audience understands it, is inspired by it, can act on it. So that's kind of when the shift started to happen for me. I was like, this is an expertise? Like explaining stuff is an expertise, really? Your question, Don, is also another one that I think has been a big struggle of mine for a long time. Is I do have a lot of different interests. I do have probably like Punam, like if you were kind of reaching for these topics that weren't like in your core area. I've done that a lot. And I got asked to give this TEDx talk because of my videos. They wanted to bring in a mental health person and they wanted me to speak on a topic related to anxiety, which makes sense because I make a lot of videos about anxiety. And I said, okay, great. So like what? And they're like, whatever you want. And I'm like, okay, great. And then I turned off the camera and I was like, what the heck am I going to talk about? I had no clue. And I said yes to doing this because I knew if I do this right, it's going to be incredibly valuable for my career. If I can find that idea worth spreading, it's going to be really valuable. But I went through, like, I said yes in like November to doing this talk, and I gave the talk in February. I missed multiple deadlines from them about like how to craft it, because I kept changing my mind because I was so unhappy with the talks I was coming up with. I would come up with an idea, and then I would pitch it to my wife. My wife is not in mental health at all. And so she's always a great stand-in for my audience, because if she's interested, like if she's interested, I'm like, yes, I've got something.
Yeah.
So I'd pitch something to her and she'd be like, okay, kind of there, maybe. And then I'd look it up on TED and I'm like, oh, someone's already done this. And then I'd watch her video and I was like, this is so much better than what I would do. And it took me a long time. And I had a very patient wife who knew this was like really important to me. And what she kept saying is like, those talks are better because this topic is so personal to that person. Like, and she finally said something which was the game changer. She's like, what is the talk that only Ali Matu can give?
Right.
And I was like, whoa, you should be the psychologist, not me. Because that is a profound thing that you said. And that's where I
what that means, Ali. You know what that means when she can do that for you?
Yeah.
You guys have been married for a while. And you're connected.
Yeah. No, she's the executive producer of my life. She is. I owe it all to her. And we know each other, and she said that. And from that flowed my talk. And then it was just a matter of refining down, getting it into the time limit, which also helped to get that clarifying message, that idea worth spreading. But that was the moment where I was like, okay, it's about me. Like, what's the only story that like I can tell? And then it all emerged out of that.
Nice. And so that's when you started bringing back in, because in your particular talk, you had these beautiful images. I might even see if I can pull one up while we're on live. But yeah, these beautiful images of both, your your
great-grandmother,
your grandmother, and then
great-grandmother.
Your great-grandmother?
Yeah.
And
She goes way back.
And your father?
And my dad,
and
me, and then at the very end, my daughter.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's when you saw how your own personal journey could be reflected into an idea for a larger audience, in terms of like kind of like interweaving.
Yeah. I mean, the idea that the talk became the title of the talk was Making Mental Health Part of Your Story. And it was weaving together my interest in storytelling, my interest in media, my interest in mental health, and also what I really believe is the future of mental health. Like, the future of mental health is not in an office. The future of mental health is in communities, and in our ability to connect with one another and to share our stories, to hear our stories, and to sort of be there for each other. And as I started crafting, like, what does that actually mean, then I thought, oh, I should show people how you do this, and I should show people the process of doing this and the ups and downs I've had, and what I've learned along the way. And then a few weeks later, I end up with this like 4-generation mental health story of trauma and how it's been passed down against the history of India-Pakistan partition and immigration, and all of this stuff kind of came out of it. I didn't set off to tell a story like that, but that's a story that it became, a story of resilience and trauma and loss, repeated loss and silence, and finding the voice, and really coming to terms with why my dad never told me these different stories until very recently. It's all that stuff sort of came out of it. But once I found that core idea, everything, these stories then emerged out of that. Because then it became, okay, how can I show this process instead of just telling it? And that became like, okay, well, what are the key stories that anchor this message?
Right. I had to pull up this image Let's see if I can actually get it to.
Oh, I love that photo. Dawn, you took that photo, and I really love that
One
photo because
moment.
that's my
Don't laugh
great
over it.
grandmother on the left. My dad and I FaceTiming during the deep in COVID, and then my daughter on the right, and I love that it just spans these all these generations, and I love that those people are on stage with me. You know,
Right.
like
Yes.
Right.
that's like, to me, it's like I hope there's someone out there that sees like someone like me can be reflected on this stage. So it's not the crap I grew up with like, like someone like me shouldn't be on that stage. Well, no, absolutely.
You
Someone
absolutely
like you. We
shouldn't.
need stories from everyone,
Right. Right. And that
Everyone
was
has a
probably
story.
why
Everyone has
everybody
a
does
story.
have a story.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we need people like yourselves, people of color, women, people like marginalized communities that don't necessarily always have or feel like they have a space on these kind of stages to know that they do,
Yeah.
and that that the perspective is so much more valuable for so many people, because the who it connects to, the audiences, just become like so much more diverse.
Mhm.
And the impact I've had as a speaker and as a coach, it's incredible to get like these letters, these cards from people, like years later, years and years later, saying like, you may or may not remember me, but you spoke at, and this is like a text I just got like yesterday or 2 days ago, at Rutgers University at Barnes and Noble. Um, and I've been following you since, I was like, oh God, have we been speaking for that long?
So you have other stalkers? I just want to go on record. I'm not the only stalker.
Well, the funny thing about social media is like with followers, don't really know like who is there until all of a sudden they pop back up and they send you a lovely card, or they said like, I watched your TEDx talk or your TED talk, and I really feel like I understand, I feel like I can change.
For me, when I finally told my story on the TEDx stage, my community finally understood why my passion was in this direction, and of parent engagement, why parents are important, why are we not meeting parents where they are, and how we can close that gap. And they would say, I never understood your story. I can't believe you went through all that.
Mm.
And it was validating to people that I respected as friends, but who had never experienced anything that I had experienced.
Right. And once they actually see it, like there's overlapping, it may not necessarily been the exact same experience, but the sentiment of what you've been through definitely it's relatable to so many parents, so many students. And I think that that's what really carries so much of these conversations is the emotion.
Mhm.
We may not have had the exact same experiences, but oftentimes we know what it's like to feel like, oh, I actually suck at this academic stuff, or oh, actually, I don't know how to really engage with people in a relationship, or whatever
Right.
that question might be. And then they see people like ourselves, and hopefully we're able to be that stepping stone towards a solution or an answer, even if we don't always necessarily know that we are that answer.
Exactly.
And there's so much value in being able to like, Punam, I'm sure your story was so deeply validating to you, and then also to other people who are going through such similar things. Now they have this resource, now that they can share this story with other people and say like, this is me. I can't explain it as well as this person does, but please watch this. Like,
Right.
there's so much value in that. And that's another reason why I think it's so important to get such diversity and stories out there, so that we can use them as a resource to teach and help other people understand stuff we're going through, even if we're not the person in the video.
And,
Right.
and I think we are at a point also where the first generation US born children are adults and now have short stories to share. Because
Right.
my parents would not have that same experience. Now, their experiences would be very different, but I think there are enough of us now that, like Elise saying, now we have a community of people going, oh, if you feel like you're going through this, listen to Ali, and he's going to help, solidify what you're going through. It's not going to be the same, but at least you have an ally.
And a couple of steps in terms of like what you can do, which is one of the things I want to ask both of you about, because I think that another key point for those who are interested in landing a TEDx talk or TED talk is that it's not about your story, right? I think that a lot of, because it is so personal, the people lean into that personal part of, and here comes my sidekick. Hi, sidekick. Come on up. Hi there.
Hi, Bella.
Say hello to the audience. Say hello.
Hi, Bella.
Hello there. Hi. So people see the story, and the story is what really helps to connect the emotion of it, right? But at the end of the day, we do need to have some type of call to action in terms of like, what can people do as a result of listening to the story? So can you talk us a little bit about like what your idea was, like kind of like the main idea? We get a sense of your guys' personalities, of your stories, of your background. What was the idea that you actually landed on? And do you think that is going to be a message that you continue to reiterate, or do you now see yourselves stepping into new ideas and new stages, or like kind of like where you were at with TEDx, and then where you're going now in terms of your messaging and your vision for your community?
Punam, you want to go first? I feel like we were on a bit of a cliffhanger with you.
I know. Okay.
You just want to get back to her story. That's
I know. What happened next?
Okay, that's the internet personality coming out right there. That's why that's on there. So for me, and I can say this now. TEDx was the very first time I had ever stepped onto a stage and spoken. Never. I mean, I'd spoken, to parent organizations and community organizations, but I had never spoken about anything at all. So TEDx was my first ever foray onto the stage. It's either go big or go home, right? So I decided TEDx was going to be the first stage. But what happened from that was it propelled my confidence. It validated what I was saying, and that it was important. It may not be important to everyone, but it was important enough to me and to other parents, grandparents to hear it. And so I just decided I'm going to keep putting myself out there. So the low confidence, low self-esteem Punam said, you know what do I have to lose? Let me try. And I just spoke at a huge conference 3 weeks ago. And it's just been fantastic. Making those connections, finding like-minded people, finding people who empathize, because I think that's the biggest part of TEDx is not only are you telling your story and you're telling why it's important, but finding people who will empathize and take it and learn so that they don't what's the word I'm looking for? Project it onto someone else. They're more aware. I think that's what I'm where I'm heading, and I think I'm looking forward to some consultant gigs. They're finally coming to
Fruition.
fruition. Thank you. So yeah, did I answer the cliffhanger, Ali? I'm trying to.
Well, I have another question now, which is, you were doing podcasting for a long time, which
Yes.
I would say like you are putting yourself out there on a stage, but it sounds like it felt very different to be on a physical stage with people watching. Like, what do you think was different about that, or you didn't consider podcast, like why podcasting might have felt different for you?
Because podcast has a layer of division.
Yeah.
Because it's not a video podcast, it's an audio podcast.
Yeah.
And I could always hide behind the fact of what I was saying if it wasn't on a large stage and people weren't listening. But
well, I get it. I mean, I do video, but I can hide behind an edit. Like if I say something badly, I can edit that out.
Redo it, do it again.
Yeah,
do it again.
Right.
Which we need to talk about. I want to talk about this whole YouTube fame thing that you've got going on. I want to be an internet personality too.
Yeah.
That's my new goal.
That's your new, now that you've conquered TEDx and you've done the book, you have a successful podcast, and now it's internet personality. Is that the next?
Yes. After I get the doctorate, we'll talk about internet personality.
Oh, right. My overachieving friends, I'm telling you.
Listen, I jump in with both feet and I figure out if I'm going to swim.
That's very true. That's very true.
I mean, there's never been a better time to have ways of telling your story and helping people. There's so many great ways to do that. So yeah, always happy to talk, Punam. We can definitely connect.
Well, and I appreciate.
You don't have to stalk. You don't have to stalk me.
Okay, good.
She will, regardless if you want to or not. Sorry.
It's just my MO. No, but you said something really interesting, Ali, and that is that there's so many ways to communicate now. Mm-hmm. When we were growing up in the 70s and 80s, it was the rotary phone, it was a telegram, it was a handwritten note.
Telegram.
Girl, please. That's how we used to get information.
In the 70s?
Well, international.
Yes.
If you were doing international stuff. Yeah.
Really? Okay.
Listen, I'm ancient. We talked about this. I'm ancient.
Not much older than me, but that's okay.
Enough of an age difference.
Apparently, you use a telegram to communicate. Next thing you're going to tell me, use pigeon carriers to send, notes.
Paul Revere delivered my letters. But we're in a stage of our technological growth where there really is no reason not to be able to share your story. There's so many platforms, there's so many opportunities. The thing that Dawn does so well is, however you want to present your voice, she's able to hone in on what that voice should look like, feel like, smell like, and then be able to throw you out into that medium and be able to facilitate it in a positive way. So I think that's really the one thing that I really appreciated, Dawn, from you is, and you would say it all the time and it would annoy me at the time, but you would say, distill your idea. That's not distilled enough. That's not distilled enough. And I'm like, well, what is distilled? I would become frustrated, but at the same time, it was a necessary evil because
evil.
It was a necessary evil because what happened was, like Ali is talking about with his YouTube channel, he's able to hone in on the topic that he's passionate about and put that on and gain TV slots, TEDx opportunities. I mean, that's the importance of understanding what your big idea is, whichever medium you decide to go into.
Yeah. So what's interesting? That's also a great assist for what I wanted to say, which is thank you. Got it. One time I was giving a talk and I said, someone in the audience asked this great question, and it was what I was going to talk about on the next slide. And I was like, thank you for that great assist. And I made this baseball bat motion, and the person was like, this guy doesn't watch any sports, does he? And I was like, oh, I actually don't. It's yeah. And so he taught me. He's like, that's a basketball reference, dude. So
I know sports, evidently.
I am no. We can talk Star Trek and Star Wars, but I can't. I will with the sports. So what? I became known as a guy who could really talk about anxiety based on my YouTube videos, but I didn't really get known as like, oh, Ollie's got this really interesting perspective on X thing. You got to hear this. Like, that did not happen. And I said yes to the TEDx when they invited me, because I knew if I could do this well, this would be exactly what I need for the next step in my career.
Right.
And the next step for me is I want to launch, I've worked as a psychologist. I worked at this mental health startup. I wanted to go out on my own and do my own thing, but I knew I would have to. It's such a crowded field. Now there are so many ways to get your voice out there, but if you don't have something unique to say, I think it's much harder. Right. So the TEDx for me was about, how do I craft something that's really valuable, and I'm presenting things in an interesting way where people would want to work with me more. And that's what I got out of it. Is my whole talk really became the basics of like, how do you start your mental health journey? How do you find the words to describe your experience? How do you share those with another person? And how do you take the next steps so you can start to help other people as much as you've helped yourself? Like, that's what my whole story is. And what I'm doing now is I'm packaging that in different ways, whether it's by changing the perspective of the new videos I'm creating new resources that people might want to buy. I'm also trying to get doing a lot more corporate speaking. Mental health is a topic that a lot of people want. They want to support their organizations more in this area. And so, my journey really started with Dawn many years ago, learning how to tell my story and how to be present. And now it's at a place where I have something that's very unique to me. And I'm hoping to bring what that message is to a lot more people now.
Amazing.
So when he's like famous and he has an entourage, I mean, we're just gonna, don't forget us. I'm just gonna say that.
I photographed evidence of Ali back in the day before any of this. So I have some stuff I can pull out.
This is why I hide in my office over here. No need for entourage when I'm in the safe confines. Yeah, my windowless room. Yeah.
I was admiring your background, by the way. I was like,
it's gorgeous.
This has been a work in progress. Go watch my old videos, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is the same guy.
I'll get there soon. One day soon.
Yeah.
Just disregard everything that's in my current background. Not a YouTube personality as of yet. So I'm working on that.
But I just want to come back to the fact of the meaning of a TEDx. Because obviously the three of us have stood on the red circle and the red dot, and it is a powerful moment, but it's a lot of work to get there. Yeah. And the great thing about Dawn is she can get you there.
Yes.
But she's not going to do the work for you. Ideas that ignite, baby. I don't have mine. But
is that a lighter? I love that.
Is.
That's great. You
like it? This is our official mastermind swag ideas. That what? Perfect.
Ideas that ignite.
I love that.
That came out of one of our cohort meetings. She kept pulling out a lighter. I'm like, why don't you just order some?
Yeah.
This came out directly of Punam being like, look, I'm just gonna find you some lighters and
I did.
She was so sick of me like pulling out regular lighters that weren't branded. So.
But it goes.
But that's the thing is like a lot of times you need someone else to be like, oh, you're good at this. Oh, like one of the things I tell therapists all the time who want to do more of this work is, what are the things that you say every day? Like, what are those messages that are always coming out? Like, write those down. Those are really meaningful. You say them a lot for a reason. I think we as humans are terrible at understanding the things that we do well all the time and other people do poorly. Like,
it's that self-deprecating attitude.
Yeah.
We're just not worthy.
We just don't know. We went, like you said, when we're in our own frame, and that's why I love the group coaching process. Everybody that I've worked with, both of you included, it's never just been me and you. It's always been like a community of listeners. Puna might hear something slightly different than you, Ali, who might be hearing something different from another person in the group. And that's the world. That's the world we live in. That's why these diversity of thoughts and experiences. Because if something is able to be articulated and it makes sense to you, and it makes sense to you, and it makes sense to you, it's like, okay, then I might actually be on to something.
Yeah. Don, that's how we worked when we first met. I think there was like 20 people in that, and we had an even smaller group of 5.
Yeah.
And that's also how my TEDx came together. Is I'd work on it, I created something, and then there was a team of 3 curators for the TEDx team at Berkeley who would then give me feedback. And it was a fascinating process where like certain messages really landed with people, and like they wanted the like very brief but very like tactical, this is what you do in this situation, which I did not expect that. And then they all were like, oh yeah, cut out the first 7 minutes. Like the first 7 minutes are like an intro to an intro to an intro to an intro. And I was like, really? But don't you need to know about this one little time where, this was happening? No. Yeah. So like get to the meat faster. So yeah, you need group feedback. You can't just have all this stuff swimming in your head by yourself,
Right. Especially because you're coming from an academic background.
Totally.
Where academic writing is very different than TEDx talking.
Yeah.
I mean, in academic writing, it's just the more the merrier. How much more can you just throw out there on a piece of paper, right?
Right.
And I'm currently working on my doctorate now, so I completely hear what you're saying. Yeah. And to get my story into 12 and a half minutes, I'm like, okay, I need to cut this "the" out and this,
this entire section out.
And Dawn's like red penning everything. She's like, yeah.
I was like, I don't care about this. When are you going to tell me what happened and how it relates?
And I think a lot of it comes from the background that you bring to the table when you work with Dawn. If you're academic, she's going to cut everything out.
Lice you up. I'm going to sleep until you get to the point.
Well, but I think that's really important because how often do we get to the point?
Right.
We want to tell the story.
I want like the background. I want you to take me on that journey. Yeah. But you don't need to start from the time that you were born.
Which was an exciting time, by the way.
Don, I remember you telling me something in that first time we met, which is, you don't have to say too much to evoke imagery in people's minds. Like I don't have to say, so I was walking down the street and it's New York City. And so there's a lot of lights on and it's very loud and stinky. You can just say like, I just passed Times Square. Like there's enough there.
You got the sound, you got the sight.
it's all the nuts for nuts. You're spelling that,
Yeah.
it's
The
all
naked
sort of,
cowboy,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
Pokemon people walking around. Yeah.
The Pokemon people. It's all there. Like, these are the little skills of storytelling that help you make things concise, sharp, fast. It reminds me, Poonam, what you said about when you first met Dawn. Well, you first saw her speak. She said something that made you look up from your doodling.
Yes.
And I think that's something that every speaker strives for, is to make it relevant to the audience, to say that thing that makes them pay attention.
Yes.
But if you're filling your talk with so much stuff, you never get to that point, So there's all these little skills that you got to pick up if you want to do this work, but they're all teachable. It's not innate. Like, again, like, you go watch my early videos and they suck. They're horrible. Like, you learn, you get better, you improve.
Duly noted. I'm going to go look at the first one.
Oh, man. The music is so loud and I'm trying to be funny. It's not funny. It's terrible. But I keep them up for that reason.
Yeah.
Is that I want people to look at them and be like, look, you get better. You got to try. You got to start from someplace.
Start somewhere. And there is growth, but you're right. It is a teachable skill, but it's work. You don't just turn on your microphone and go. Yeah. It takes effort and it takes time, and part of the journey of getting onto a TEDx stage is to be able to really figure that piece out.
Right.
Agreed.
Well, I want to wrap up rather soon, because we've been on this bad boy for about an hour, which is amazing. Yes. But I want to also leave the audience or any listeners with any type of tips or anything that was kind of unexpected in your own journey. You guys have been on very different journeys that have led you to this red dot and now beyond. Poonam, I know that you recently spoke at South by Southwest, and you're just kind of continuing that. Yes,
that's a cool stage also to be
very
on.
Cool. One that I have not been on. Okay, so you're ahead of me in that regard.
Better tacos at South by Southwest.
There are pretty good. It is pretty good. Yeah, it wasn't too bad. It wasn't too shabby.
It wasn't too shabby. I did watch. We'll talk about my feedback from your presentation, by the way.
Oh, you watched it?
Oh yeah.
Oh Lord. The recording will not be on when that happens. Okay.
But we'll do that part offline. But for people who either are interested in the idea of presenting, and it doesn't have to be necessarily TED or TEDx. It could just be any large stage where which could really amplify your visibility as a thought leader or as somebody who's a go-to person within this industry. Any tips or thoughts or kind of closing remarks in terms of what people should look for or how they should go about this?
Ali, go ahead.
I have had all the successes I've had, I think, in terms of anything that's public facing has come from things where it's a topic I talk about a lot, whether you want to talk to me about that or not. I will talk about psychology day in and day out. I will talk about science fiction day in and day out. I talk about mental health. And then also where that intersects with things that people either ask me about a lot or I get paid to do. So that was anxiety for me, is I often get asked about that, invited to speak about this, or people consult with me about this kind of stuff. And then for me, every sort of talk I give, it's about combining these things I always want to talk about, my interests, with the things people always ask me about, which is anxiety, and then finding personal stories that sort of weave all this stuff together. So I would say there's a lot, if you're trying to figure this out, do a lot of brain maps here. just jot those things down. Like, what are the things people always ask me about? What are the things I always talk about? And then at the end, you'll find personal stories that can kind of weave it together, and there's your talk. It sounds simple, but it's a long process, but it's a process, and it's fun. It's stressful. It's confusing, but it's worth it. It's definitely worth it. And that's me. And that's where you can find more of my stuff.
I will be checking you out.
The YouTube channel. So you said that the first ones were the horrible ones. Where do I find those?
Yeah, if you go to videos, I don't know if YouTube lets you click on videos up top, the video tab right next to home and before shorts. Maybe, yeah, you can click on that. And then it doesn't let you do it anymore. There used to be a way where you sort by age or something, or sort by oldest, and it would show the oldest ones first. You would just have to scroll down for a very long time. Maybe if you hit playlists, actually, Don, hit playlists.
Playlist?
Yeah, up top there's a tab that says playlist. I have a playlist that's like every video from beginning, and that playlist might, yeah, if you click on that one, there's some video here that there's some playlist that's like every video I've made, and that one might it's showing you all the like more recently updated playlists. But there's a playlist there that says like every episode, and if you click on that, it'll start with the first one.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
I like the look on your face on this one. I don't know if you can see my mouse actually.
Oh, the brain one over there. Yeah, that was a fun time.
I love it. Love it.
Awesome. And then how about you, Punam? I'll pull up your website or
So I appreciate the fact that each one of us comes with a different set of circumstances and desires. And what is successful for me may not be successful for either of you. So I think having realistic expectations is one thing that we have to, it's something we have to think about. What is going to make us successful, not compared to somebody who's making, $1 million per talk or whatever. If my message is being received and resonating well, is that successful? So I think, first of all, we need to define that parameter. So that's the first tip, I would say. And the other is believe in yourself. When I came to you, Dawn, I did not believe in myself. I knew I had a story. I knew that it impacted my life in a way that I was just starting to understand. But I didn't believe that anybody else would care to hear it. And what I realized is that's the furthest from the truth, because when you're showing up authentically and you're genuinely emotional and passionate about what you're sharing, people are going to gravitate towards you. People want to know that their challenges, even though they may be different, they can at least acknowledge the challenges you've had and celebrate your wins. Because guess what? If I can stand on a TEDx stage as a average student whose parents wanted her to be the president of the United States, thank God I'm not. Can I say that? Today is a really good day to say that. But didn't have the self-confidence for most of my for the first half of my life. Yeah, you can stand up there. There's nothing precluding you. So you have to believe in yourself. You have to surround yourself with people who can support you. Not kiss your butt, but they're genuinely there to be a critical eye and ear. And I think those are the tips that I would give. Surround yourself with people that you are able to resonate with.
And that can give you some solid feedback.
I know. And that's the part that scares me. Oh, no, you need to go to Punam B. Saxena. I've changed my website.
I noticed that. I had pulled it up earlier for whatever reason. It wasn't coming back to me.
So while you're pulling that up, Dawn, can I want to really second that idea of believing in yourself. I think it's so important now. The idea of authenticity, of being authentic. Something I've learned the hard way is just the hard way, meaning like by doing this a lot, is I think the audience is always rooting for you.
Yes.
And they want you to do well. They want an engaging, interesting speech. And the audience is so drawn to authenticity. And I think that is now needed more than ever. There's this idea in a lot of journalism of showing your work, of showing your process. Now that AI stuff is it's so hard to tell what's real and not, what's a real podcast, what's a real video, all this sort of stuff.
Right.
The more authentic and you are, I think the more it connects with audiences now more than ever. It's what everyone is craving, is some authentic connection.
Right. It's so true. It's so true.
I think COVID has also amplified that need to connect with people. For 2 years, we all sat on a screen and chatted with each other. And that human connection is the one thing that is what we need to survive and thrive.
I've been thrilled that events have opened back up. For anybody who is part of my audience, you've seen probably the 1,000+ list of TEDx events that are happening this year alone. So definitely want to encourage people to get out there, to apply, to know what you're doing, to get some feedback, because the first piece of spaghetti that you throw at the wall is not going to stick. If it does, I need to have you do a TEDx talk about that. Your first idea ever stick and land. But yeah, just make sure that you get people who can be a community that can actually be critical thinkers and critical feedback for you, that are not just gonna say that's great, that's wonderful, because that's not often how this stuff works.
Yeah.
But also most importantly is start doing the thing that you are passionate about. Start talking about it on a podcast or on YouTube or in blogs, because the fact is you will be researched. People will look up your name and say why is Punam the person to be talking about this? Why is Ali the person to be talking about this? Once again, it goes back to experts in a field who know how to actually tell a story. So I think that's really key to lean into. Today is just one of those days. 1 second.
And I also think, and Elaine, you probably have felt this way too, is that TEDx is, by far the cherry on every dessert, right? Everybody wants to be on the TED stage. And everyone probably could get there if they have the proper community and coach to be able to critically navigate them through the work. And again, I'll go back, it's a lot of work. Yeah. I did not realize that when I signed up. I'm like, oh, I can just, talk Dawn and, she'll be my coach and I'll just, land a TED Talk. That didn't work that way. Somehow I ended up doing more work than I thought I was going to need to. But it was also a healing process and a learning process, which I found has helped me since.
And I think, Punam, our stories are so complementary to each other, because it sounds like a lot of your work was getting to the point of applying and doing it. And a lot of my work came from saying yes And then it was like, what am I gonna talk about? Like, I put in so much more work into this talk than any other talk I've given, where I had, I created flashcards that on one side had my slide, the picture, and on the other side was what I was going to say, like beat by beat, joke by joke, like, and I had that stuff memorized. And that level of the memorization is what helped me to kind of flow and be flexible at times based on what the audience was going for, and keep it in time. Like, I rarely am that well prepared for a talk, like where I just nail it beat by beat. And while everyone wants to get on that stage, it is a lot of work, and it's an honor and a privilege that people are coming to hear what you have to say. And in those situations, I feel like as a speaker, you have to bring it.
Right.
You have to show up for the people who have shown up for you.
Right.
Absolutely.
And that's there's no way around that besides putting in the work, putting in the practice.
Absolutely.
That's
And so for my TEDx talk, and it was 2021, I did a little
okay.
searching of my cobweb files in my head. But, we were still in that hybrid situation where we were doing things online. Some people were coming in person. So we did have a live audience. It was did you want COVID? No, I didn't want
Did I guarantee you that I would come if you landed the talk?
Yes, I'm still waiting. We're done.
And you boycotted me.
I did boycott you. I didn't want you to get COVID. Okay, Ali, please tell her that I was doing it for her best interest, not to get COVID.
Dot, it was a weird time. It was a weird time.
Thank you.
Our everyday rules were out the window.
But what was very interesting about that was my family in India. I have a very extended family in India, and they were getting up at whatever time it was to watch me speak. And I didn't realize, and this was me being a little naive, that anybody else would be interested in listening to me, except for the people sitting in the audience. Like, who wants to listen to me for 12 and a half minutes? I mean, you guys have listened to me for an hour and 22. I mean, I'm just, but that goes back to confidence, and that goes back to feeling like you're deserving to be on that stage.
Yeah.
And that's what your support community does.
Well, I hope that you all both have people that you know, like, love you, that trust you, that have really like leaned into you, even if you don't see them. I know that they're there. I've seen them because I've seen it for myself. And I hope that you know that this is just like your journeys have started a long time, even before meeting me. And they're going to go on much more. They're just going to accelerate so much more. I've already seen it, Ali, I can't wait for yours to actually be published, like your talk alone.
I know.
Because it was a phenomenal closing speech for TEDx.
Thank you.
You were the closer. Wow.
That's a lot of pressure.
Oh my gosh.
I was really stressed.
I was number 2. They knew that I needed to get in
this
and out.
entire day.
Oh, I feel like
you were at the top.
There's no easy starting or closing. There's no easy way to do it. Yeah.
No. Either which way you have to, is a good example, right?
Yeah.
So
people are looking to hear what we have to say, and that is it's a very humbling place to be.
Yeah, it's a blessing and a privilege to be able to like express something that we have on our minds and our hearts, to kind of combine those two, to send it out to the world. You don't know if who's going to be impacted by it, and sometimes you may never know, but we do know that the work that you all are doing is having a huge impact. So thank you, first of all, for entrusting me in the process of having you as a coach in some way or form, to like listen to your story, and for just like trusting the process that yes, you and you listener get onto these stages, It's feasible. It's within reach. If people are interested in more about my specific programs, I do have a program called Ideas That Ignite, which is where the lighter and all the inside jokes have been coming from. And we're kicking things off for the spring, because if people are serious about landing a TEDx talk in 2023, the window is closing. You may have heard Ali mention this timeline, that he was accepted in November, spoke in February, and here we are in April, and the talk has not yet gone live, right? In my own situation, I applied in 2013. My video went live sometime in 2014 or 2013. I mix up the year sometimes. But it wasn't years later until TED published it on their own platform. But in the meantime, there's things that we need to be doing, things that we can continually do to build up our audiences. And I know that now that you guys do have this audience of people who are listening to you or paying attention, I can't wait to see like what's next in store for you. And thank you so much just for your sharing your insights, your inspirational journeys with people. And if people want to know more about my own stuff, that's the website, ignite.donjfraser.com. People who are looking.
Don's the best. Don's the best. That's what I'll say.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Ali. I paid him to say that. I'll send it.
So what I do is whenever I see another TEDx coach, I kind of peruse their stuff, and I'm like, I don't know what they're doing. And I'll send it to Dawn. I'm like, what is this stuff?
Hey, we all have a journey. Some people try it out, but I've been doing this now for 10 years in terms of some type of speech or story coaching. So I hope that it shows. I hope that if people are interested. I would love to have you be the next success story on one of these streams.
That would be awesome. Yeah.
Any closing words?
Don's the best. No, thanks for having us, Don. And thanks for, what you don't usually see is a story behind the story. So thanks for giving us a chance to share that here with the audience.
Absolutely. Ali and I've never met. So for those of you in the audience who've made it this far, I feel like we're friends now. And it's because Dawn brings in those clients who want to help each other, who have that desire to see everyone succeed. And Dawn's in it to win it. But she's in it to win it for you.
Yeah.
I just want to be Indian.
Everybody does. Everybody does.
I mean, I'm West Indian, so
There we go.
We'll let you in.
All right. Thanks, y'all, and thanks for everybody who tuned in. I see some of your comments over here. Thanks for tuning in. It was a great session. And be in touch. Follow up with Dr. Ali and Punam on their respective sites, and we'll see you on the next live stream soon.
Thank you, Dawn.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.